Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cosmic Echo, a Tate Leaders podcast. I'm Matt, and he's Lee.
Hey everyone.
And today we're interviewing David J. Brown, the author of Dreaming Wide Awake, kind of an overview of lucid dreaming, out-of-body states, altered consciousness, psychedelic shamanism, a whole bunch of things. It goes into the science behind it. It's really a very interesting read, and we have today. This talk is mostly centered around dreaming wide awake, but we go into other things around lucid dreaming, what maybe lucid dreaming is, dream characters, and other things like dreaming supplements that you could probably go into. We really talk about a lot of things, and it's a pretty interesting conversation. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
So we'll just start off by having you introduce yourself and talk about how you got involved in lucid dreaming, psychedelics, and how you got started in this whole experience that you've written about in your awesome book.
Gosh, I wish I knew where to start with that question. I'm a science writer. I'm the author of 16 books about the evolution of consciousness. I had an LSD experience when I was 16 years old, and within a couple of days of that experience, I spontaneously had a lucid dream, a dream where I became aware in the dream while I was dreaming that it was actually a dream. And it wasn't until years later that I learned control them and learn techniques. But that was what sparked my interest, was actually having it spontaneously occur to me. And then years later, I encountered Stephen LaBerge, the psychophysiologist from Stanford University, and it was really thanks to spending time with him and reading his books that I learned techniques for increasing the probability of having a lucid dream. And then since then, there's been a great deal of scientific research that I've been following and kept a keen interest in. And my book is an attempt to not only recount what I've learned about how to have lucid dreams, how to have more lucid dreams, and what to do with lucid dreams in terms of the fantasy fulfillment opportunity, in terms of the therapeutic applications, and spiritual awareness increases, and all those different things. All those things to me over the years. But I also really wanted to explore the interface between lucid dreaming and psychedelic shamanism, which was something that I felt hadn't been explored properly in other books, and in fact hadn't been explored at all. And I thought this was an important association. So that's how I got started. That was my motivation, and that's what I was doing with all that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Through reading your book, I've definitely noticed some ties between psychedelics and dreaming in there, as well as you're very open about your personal experiences and other people's experiences that you've encountered. And I'm really interested how you went out and met all these people. Like Stephen LaBerge is very hard to talk to generally today. So in your book, you talk about like meeting Terrence McKenna and things like that, or people like that. And I'm just blown away by how many people you've actually reached out and communicated to, and interested how you did that.
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot, actually. That's kind of the subject of my book. I wrote a book called The New Science of Psychedelics, and it's basically about all the people I've interviewed and what I've learned from all the different people that I've interviewed. I've done 6 interview books now. And I started doing these interview collections because I realized when I was in my mid-20s that I had an incredible opportunity. I had friends who were friends with people like Timothy Leary and Terrence McKenna and John Lilly and that whole crowd of the psychedelic community at the time, which was very small. This was back in the early 90s. And it just occurred to me one night, me and my girlfriend were sitting around and we said, we're getting to meet these amazing people. Nobody had interviewed these people about basic meaning of life questions. Like nobody's gone around and asked people, what do you think, the purpose of life is? What do you think happens to consciousness after death? What do you think of the concept of God? All these kinds of like really deep philosophical questions have never been asked. And we saw it as our opportunity and our mission, and to go around. And I started when I was in my mid-20s with people like Terrence McKenna and Timothy Leary. And over the years, I've been really fortunate to be able to interview everyone from Noam Chomsky to George Carlin, to Jerry Garcia, Andrew Weil. I mean, some really amazing people, and feel very blessed. And I've tried really hard to, just as you've done when you interviewed me, to be really respectful of people, and try really hard to make sure that they're happy with the interview before it's published. And that way I built up a good reputation and was able to do more and more interviews. But it also came down to, it really came down to somebody telling me when I was younger that whenever you really love a book that you read by someone, you should write the author and tell them how much you love the book. You would be surprised how happy the author usually is to hear from you. And I was very surprised to hear this. I was like, well, people are usually so busy. But now as an author myself, I'm always delighted whenever I hear from somebody who reads my books and enjoys them. So that's the advice I would give out to people. If you read the book of someone you really love, write them, tell them, how much you love the book. And then if you're, really motivated, try to interview them. And that was how I built a career, around that.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I found a lot of similarities in your experience in your book, Dreaming Wide Awake, that I've had kind of like through the process I've gone through in experiencing dreams and psychedelics. And I'm kind of interested in like your how you tie dreams to psychedelics, and how like I know that you talked about like your first LSD experience or whatever, but like did your dreams kind of inspire you to try to learn more about the psychedelic experience because of that?
Yeah, in a number of different ways. I mean, one of the things that I learned early was that when I'm in a lucid dream, I can take a dream psychedelic and have a psychedelic experience in the lucid dream without actually doing a drug in physical waking reality. It seems that once your brain knows how to do these things, you can smoke DMT in a dream and have a full-blown DMT experience. One of the most fascinating things to me, the crossover between dreams and psychedelic experiences is the phenomena where you interact with other intelligences or entities. People who smoke high doses of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, or salvia divinorum, or use ayahuasca, often encounter what seem to be non-human entities that seem to be incredibly intelligent and more advanced than us. And it's been there's been a lot of speculation about this and philosophical intrigue as to whether these beings are really independent of us or whether they're just a projection of our own minds and a part of us. The same thing's encountered in lucid dreaming, where, if you start to dialogue with the characters in the dream, you'll find that although some of them are kind of mechanical and robot-like and puppet-like, there are some that seem very independently minded and some that seem wiser and more intelligent and seem to know more about us than we know ourselves. So there is this phenomenon within the lucid dream where you seem to be able to tap into an intelligence. You can do this directly by just ignoring all the characters in the lucid dream and just talking to the dream itself. You can just talk to the sky in a lucid dream, ask it questions, and it will dialogue with you. It'll either speak back to you in English, or it'll change the nature of a dream into something that answers your question, or it will answer your question in a future dream. But you can set up a dialogue with the other, with a capital O. And it's very similar to what people experience in ayahuasca journeys on magic mushrooms. And whether this is an independent intelligence, whether it's God or a deity or a spirit or the backside of your own brain is a philosophical mystery. But it's certainly intriguing, and it's especially interesting that it happens in both states of consciousness.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. With that, like in mind, shamanism, it seems like it's influenced you a lot as well. And these dream characters and kind of dream guides that you interact with, kind of in line with, like shamanistic type practices. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about that, how you've maybe used some type of shamanism in your dream practice.
Well, I've studied different branches of shamanism from around the world. I spent time down in Peru, down in Iquitos, and interacted with the shamanistic circuit down there. I guess one of the major important things to talk about with the crossover between lucid dreaming and shamanic psychedelic shamanism is the fact that both can be used as tools for healing, as powerful tools for healing. Shamanism is really mostly about healing. It's not about exploring your mind, and just traveling to other realities just for the fun of it or just to learn more about yourself. In indigenous societies, it's primarily used and as an important, they don't have doctors and nurses or hospitals. This is how they heal people, is they use shamanism. So shamanism as a technique for healing can utilize lucid dreaming as one of its techniques. People often report healing experiences in lucid dreams. Robert Wagner, who he edits a quarterly journal on lucid dreaming, he told me when I interviewed him that I think he said every single time he does an issue, he always gets a couple of submissions a month from people who write about their healing experiences with lucid dreaming. So being able to use lucid dream for physical healing, I've interviewed people who told me about how they had one person, for example, had an infection in his tonsils that he had found himself in a lucid dream, imagined a glowing white light around his throat area in the dream, and woke up and 95% of the infection had cleared up. Other people told me about using healing techniques for psychological phenomena as well. I personally used it as a technique for overcoming childhood trauma. So I think the healing potential of lucid dreaming is one of the main characteristics, and that it has in common with shamanism in general.
Yeah, I know in your book you talked about sleep paralysis as well, and some of the effects with that, like overcoming fear. Do you see that like being beneficial for people who have like PTSD and other or maybe depression even?
Yeah, well, let me take this into two parts, that question. Sleep paralysis, for the people that don't know, is when your body remains asleep while your mind wakes up. It often happens to people in the early morning hours. It usually doesn't last very long, but it's usually very frightening when it does happen. People will find themselves lying in bed and they feel like they're frozen, to the back of the bed, or like they're magnetized. It's just too heavy. Their limbs, everything is just too heavy to move, that they can open their eyes. And it's often a terrifying experience, not only because of the paralysis, being awake, not being able to move your body, but also because people often see a threatening or menacing type figure that's walking towards them or sitting on their chest or trying to strangle them or harm them in some way. And people often struggle and burst out of that state very quickly and wake up a couple seconds later very frightened and glad that it was over. In my experience practicing this for many years, I've learned to embrace this sleep paralysis experience, because it's an incredible opportunity for lucid dreaming or for out-of-body experiences. Now, this is what I've learned, and what I'm going to share with your listeners, is that when you're in this state, if you find yourself in a state of sleep paralysis tonight, the thing to do is to relax and to do your best. It's going to be scary, but do your best to just control the fear and try to move your body. When you try to move your body, you'll notice that your body won't move. Go to lift your arm up. Your arm's not going to move up, but you'll feel that something does. You'll feel like a ghostly kind of appendage, or like an astral or phantom limb that kind of moves in correspondence to your will. So what you want to do is you want to try to identify with that ghostly appendage as much as possible, as that being your body. And you'll find it's like a trick. The more you kind of move that arm, the independent arm, or move your independent legs, and imagine that it's you, the more you'll start to identify with the ghostly appendage or the dream body, and you'll start to separate from your physical body. And for a while, you'll kind of be both. You'll be like dream body and physical body. And you can use that as a springboard to actually leap off and go into an out-of-body experience or a lucid dream. I've done it many dozens of times and spoken to other people who have. So that's one thing, and that's a really important trick to learn if you really want to lucid dream more. The other question you asked, I believe, was about using that as a technique for overcoming, say, childhood trauma or trauma in your life of some
Right.
kind.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess that could be helpful. I mean, certainly confronting any fear, but people often use lucid dreaming more specifically for that. They will, for example, if someone's having a nightmare repeatedly throughout their life, some psychotherapists will try to train the person to become lucid in their dreams. And when they become lucid in the nightmare, to confront whatever it is, the menacing figure that's been following them or chasing them in their dreams, to turn around and to just say, hey, what's going on? Why are you chasing me? And more often than not, there's usually like a dialogue created. Well, you hurt me when you were a child or something like that. There'll be some kind of like remembering of, some kind of experience that created the trauma, and there's some kind of reconciliation. Stephen LaBerge, the psychophysiologist that I mentioned earlier, the sleep researcher from Stanford University who helped to create the science of lucid dreaming, actually suggests that you hug the menacing character, try to create a sense of warmth, and you can melt into them or unify with them. And a lot of people have reported that in doing this, that they reconcile traumas in their life, that they're able to heal from the pain of different things, and a lot of people have been very successful. This is an area that's really crying out for more scientific study. It hasn't been that carefully studied, but it seems like there's a really enormous potential.
Yeah, it does. It sounds a lot like where Carl Jung was talking about merging with the shadow. Is that kind of like the same thing you're talking about here with kind of merging in or hugging?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good, it's a pretty good analogy as Jung's shadow. It would, be like integrating the shadow or moving the shadow into your whole self. So
interesting.
Those aspects of yourself that you sort of cut off from.
Yeah, I just wanted to add my own little personal experiences, because I came into lucidity precisely because of recurring nightmares. In my experience, like I guess I'm a restless sleeper, and I still am. So I often have lucid dreams, and that's just like my normal, often most normal state of sleeping is a lucid dream.
Oh,
and
well,
I kind
gosh,
of
aren't you lucky?
I mean, yes and no. Like at the beginning, it was recurring nightmares. I would have horrible reoccurring nightmares that turned into sleep paralysis, and my sleep paralysis got worse and worse. But until eventually, I when I was in my lucid like recurring nightmares, I had this idea to just let this menace try to kill me. So I just like let him to try. I'm like, okay. So I let this dream character kill me, and the dream started over, and that's what caused this reinforcement loop that I was in a dream state, because I was like, this is weird. It just restarted over, and after a few cycles of this,
Wait, were you lucid during the period when you let him kill you? That was you were dreaming?
That was the dream, right? And I had the idea in my dream to just let him kill me, and that's kind of like the beginning stages of lucidity. And then the dream restarted, and that reinforced this concept that I was, this was a dream, and I was aware that it was a dream. And eventually, after a few cycles of having it replay over, I was just like, you know what, I don't want to die anymore. So I just I turned into like this super sword arm man dude, and just like slashed away this entire dream state with my arms, and I was basically in control of my dreams from that point on. And I'm able to do pretty neat things. Like I was really into creative writing, so I would ask the dream to create these like scenarios, and I can return to them at will whenever I sleep. Like space operas, like currently my two like running dreams are like a dream of somebody building a space elevator in South America, and it's just like I just watched this dude create a space elevator, and like the geopolitical, consequences that come with doing that in a third world, or practically a third world country. So what I try to do is I try to like record that down, and I just use my lucid dreams in that way. But they can also, you know, be used in other ways that I haven't explored as much. But there are some very weird lucid dreaming experience that I've had, and I'm also starting meditation, which also creates even more weird lucid states.
Indeed, indeed it does. It's fascinating. I wish I had spoken to you before my book was published. I would have definitely have used some of your anecdotes in my book. I mean, they really sound fascinating. It's exactly the sort of thing I was looking to explore is what you're describing, encouraging people to utilize their dreams for creativity enhancement. I spoke to artists who, use lucid dream states to get ideas for their paintings, and I personally use it for my writing. So yeah, what you're describing is precisely what I was exploring in my book. So that's really fascinating. I wish I had been able to add some of your experiences to the book. They're truly interesting.
Yeah, it's what struck me was your addition to like you saying stuff about dream characters and like some of them having intelligence and some of them not. And in my experience, you can kind of like ask the dream to imbue these kind of characters with their own little personality, and then you just expect them to act a certain way because they're established characters now, and you don't.
Yeah. Well, you see, you're really touching upon what for me is the key mystery about lucid dreaming. Who is that dreaming mind that you're talking to? Who is that? Right? I mean, that is the real mystery. There's an intelligence there that you're interacting with, and it's a great intelligence. It's building the dream somehow, and yeah, who is that? What is that? That's one of the great mysteries.
Well, I mean, David, who do you think that is, or what do you think that is then? What is your opinion about it?
I mean, I've explored all different models over the years as to who and what that could be. Whether it's, a higher part I tend to think it's a higher part of ourselves, that it's some aspect of ourselves, either a higher part of our brain, an aspect of our right hemisphere of our brain is communicating with our left hemisphere, or that it's a part of us in the future, or that it's a spirit, that's somehow independent and coming to help and teach us. I've explored all these ideas, and to be honest, none of them really are really that satisfactory. It's a deep mystery. It really is. I really don't have anything that I firmly believe about it. It seems like every time I form a model, something comes along that contradicts the model. So it's very. I'm very curious. What do you guys think? I mean, who do you think? What do you think we're interacting
Well,
with?
that's a good question. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that I think it's very complex too, and something in your book actually kind of made me start to think about is this concept that we're always dreaming. I remember reading that in your book. I forget who you quoted as having that theory, and it seemed like it was kind of an older theory. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Gosh, I'm trying to remember it. Actually, who it was that had said that in the book. I do remember somebody had this idea that it's sort of always going on in the background.
Yeah.
We're always dreaming, and that we're just not conscious of it, and that sensory phenomena, our perception of the sensory world is overshadowing. It's not that one takes the place of the other, but the dreaming is sort of always going on at another level, and that sometimes we have sensory perception going on over it, and that influences it. And when you take the sensory perception away, what you're left with is just the original dream state. At least that was one theory. I can't remember. Gosh, I can't remember who it was.
I can't remember the name of the person either. But it struck me as very plausible. I mean, from the recent studies with the psychedelics, with it actually shutting down certain areas of your brain, and then kind of like this dream world kind of coming in. Yeah, and that kind of made me think about this idea that maybe dreams are actually like real consciousness, and that our concept of consciousness is actually just like it's make believe. Actually, it's more of a dream than a dream is, where it's kind of like a front or agreed upon idea based off all these subconsciousness kind of like things making a constant stream of consciousness up front. And probably didn't elegantly say that, but yeah, that's where I'm at right now. And it was actually inspired because of your book, because I was like having these ideas based off of especially that idea that we're always dreaming and how that is actually kind of playing out in reality now, like that concept. And it makes me think that maybe consciousness is actually just like a byproduct of different aspects, like archetypes creating actual like our concept of consciousness.
That's really fascinating. One of the consequences of doing the book that I did and thinking about lucid dreaming so much and having so many lucid dreams and psychedelic experiences is that I started to realize that in the lucid dream state, I was out of just memory and imagination, creating an entire reality that was every bit as tangible and three-dimensional and realistic as waking world reality. So if I'm able to do that purely out of imagination and memory, what does that mean for what I'm doing right now? I mean, how much of what I'm creating right now is really real when I know it's just a massive sensory signals coordinating in my brain, and somewhere in my visual cortex I'm creating a model, the world outside. In both cases, I'm just creating models. Right now I'm creating a model of the situation, and in a dream I'm just creating a model. And is the model equivalent to reality? I mean, we don't really know. There's some kind of interesting overlap. There's also interesting overlap in a dream. I mean, if you were to stay in a dream and not be able to wake up, I mean, would you eventually feel that was reality? I mean, when I interviewed Rupert Sheldrake, the biologist, his idea was that after we die, we basically go into a state that's like a dream that we can't wake up from. And this is similar to what Tibetan Buddhists say. In Tibetan Buddhism, which has been practiced for several thousand years, they utilize lucid dreaming as a way of preparing people for what they think happens in the after-death state. That after death, after dying, you basically enter like a dream state that you can't wake up from. And if you have practice in the lucid dream state, you'll be able to wake up in that state and become conscious, and then help to redirect, they believe, your next incarnation. So does lucid dreaming teach us about reality, or does reality sound? It's very hard to say what's really real once you've encountered this, because you realize that everything can simply be a model in your own mind. And if you can, wake up from a dream and inside of a dream and realize that your mind is creating it, why couldn't that same thing happen in this reality? Couldn't you wake up in this reality in some sense and realize this is all a dream, just a creation in the model?
I have something to offer on this line of reasoning, especially when it comes to awareness. You can be offered a realization that totally changes your perspective of the world, and you all of a sudden become aware of different things and live your life a different way. And this has happened to me a couple times, and it's like you said, there's almost some kind of conscious operating model of how the world works. And if you become aware of something and it doesn't jive with your model of how the world works, you get there's effects to that. You can either be manic and have anxiety, or you could be depressed. And once you change that model, you often go you often reconcile a lot of different things and go down that path until you hit another roadblock. So that seems to be like the common the common life experience.
Yeah.
David, what is your current practice, I guess? What are you doing with lucid dreams that like keeps you interested in them, I guess? Like what are you doing with this space, this awareness?
Well, to be honest, it's I'm not really practicing dreams now as actively as I was when I was writing the book. My latest project has been interviewing women visionary artists. And that's my new book. So I to be honest, I haven't been lucid dreaming as much as I was during the period when I was writing that book and during other periods of my life. The thing about lucid dreaming is that it's not like riding a bicycle. It's more like an athletic sport, in the sense that it's not just something you learn and then you just have lots and lots of lucid dreams. something that if you really want to keep having lucid dreams, you've got to be actively rehearsing and actively training and actively practicing these techniques regularly, like asking yourself, am I dreaming right now, and doing reality tests and different things. And when you find that you're practicing all the techniques regularly, your lucid dreaming becomes more regular. But I haven't been practicing it as much in the past year as I had in the past couple of years. But I still spontaneously have lucid dreams. I guess maybe around once every couple of weeks now. A couple times a month or something like that. I'm just spontaneously have them. I've systematically gone through and tried everything, that I want to try in a lucid dream. Everything from flying and going underwater, and sex with ideal lovers, and shared dreams with my partner. And I've really explored all these things. There's not too much left at this point that I haven't explored. So I haven't really been that actively pursuing it. But I'm sure at some point in my life I will again. I found that it kind of comes and goes in cycles. And like the last time I got actively involved in lucid dreaming was shortly after I had a series of ayahuasca experiences down in Peru. And that was what motivated me to write the book. And there were other periods of my life where I was having lucid dreams regularly. When I say regularly, I mean, a couple of times a week for a few months at least. And that's happened during a number of periods of my life, usually during periods of transition or change of some kind, or on developing a new perspective or a new trajectory in life or something like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I know you mentioned a few times in your book about having psychedelic type experiences, and then soon after, and as well as other people that you've interviewed, soon after they have those experiences, they kind of have a series of lucid dreams. Why do you kind of think that is?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I personally, there's a couple of theories about that. That there's a similar circuit in the brain. There's a latent circuit in the brain that gets activated by the psychedelics that basically makes the whole brain just slightly more aware, or slightly more conscious in some ways, and that consciousness spreads into your dreaming awareness. In some sense, dreaming, lucid dreaming is bringing waking consciousness into the dream realm, and in some sense, having a psychedelic experience is bringing some of the dream realm into waking consciousness. So it's like an interface between these two different worlds. But I'm sorry, what was your question again?
Just the why. You answered it pretty much. The psychedelics were actually inducing some type of lucid experience inside of dreams soon after using them, and I was interested why you thought that maybe that was.
Well, it's interesting. One of the interesting opposite effects about lucid dreaming is and psychedelic experiences is that in a lucid dream, the major difference between a lucid dream and a non-lucid dream, on a physiological level, is in an area in the brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is on the left side of the brain, right in the front, is very active. And that's, people, in fact, they can actually stimulate lucid dreaming by just activating the prefrontal cortex using a transcranial stimulation. And for people who are already asleep, they can stimulate lucid dreaming by stimulating that part of the cortex. So the prefrontal cortex plays a role in lucid dreaming, but doesn't play a role in dreaming. And oddly, in psychedelic experiences, the prefrontal cortex becomes kind of silent. It's silent because it's less active in a psychedelic state. So somehow it's causing like an opposite kind of effect. Somehow, by decreasing the prefrontal cortex activity during your waking state, maybe it increases it during your dreaming state. Because it seems like that's the sort of cycle that it goes through. It gets silenced for a while, and then it becomes more active. So I wondered if that isn't playing a role in why people become lucid shortly after having a psychedelic or shamanic experience.
That would make sense. Yeah. I also, have thought about this as well because, just like in your book, I've definitely had increased lucid dreams soon after using a psychedelic substance, and I always thought that maybe it was something on the emotional level, like you're familiar with an experience, so then, or a feeling or a sound, and then kind of, you remember that more. And so then when you have that feeling, you become aware that you're in that instance, kind of, and maybe that's both physical, in the brain happening physically and as well as emotionally because of that experience, like the similarities.
Right. That makes sense. And there'd be kind of a resonance then between those states.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, I know in your book you talked about supplements as well, and I'm always interested in supplements. Recently, there's some research released about galantamine having like very profound influences on lucid dreams. And I know in your book you talked about it a little bit, but it wasn't effective for you. But I'm interested in supplements because some people are so against them, and
Right.
they treat them as like cheat codes or something like that. I'm wondering,
Right.
your perception of supplements and, like, how have you used them? Why did you use them? And, kind of like, what would you be your advice to other people interested in that area?
Yeah, happy to answer that question because that was another aspect of my book that hasn't really been explored in other books on lucid dreaming. As you say, people see it as cheating or something like that. Or it's not only with lucid dreaming. People somehow think that a spiritual experience or a mystical experience is somehow not as authentic if you have it with a psychedelic and compared to meditation or something. There's this sort of stigma that's attached to drug. And it carries over to nutrients and plants and sacred plants and medicinal plants. It's really not appropriate. There's a whole chapter in my book where I personally tried dozens of different nutritional supplements, herbs, and drugs, psychoactive drugs, to see what kind of effect they would have on my dreaming, my dream recall, and whether or not I would lucid dream. And I found some of them to be incredibly effective. Some of them not to be that effective, and some of them to make things a little worse. But I could talk a little bit about the one that you mentioned, galantamine, is the most popular. That is, basically a cognitive enhancer. It's used to help people with senile dementia and memory disorder problems because it helps to increase awareness in the brain. But I found that for me it was just too stimulating, even at low dosages. I couldn't fall asleep on it. So even at the 3 or 4 milligram, which was the lowest dose people said to take, I still wasn't able to sleep. But I know some people that it's like pressing a button to lucid dream for some people. It's very effective. I did find some things that were pretty effective. There are 2 herbs that I found that dramatically increased dream recall and the amount of dreaming, and had changed the emotional quality of the dream in a very hard to define way, but in a certainly noticeable way. And that was Kalia Zacatiki, which is otherwise known as the Mexican dream herb, which is easily available online or in a lot of health food stores or herb shops. And the other one was Silene capensis, which is the African dream herb. They both have mild psychedelic effects, so that when you drink the tea before you go to sleep or smoke it before you go to sleep, as you're falling asleep, your hypnagogic imagery is pretty dramatically increased. However, I found that with both of them, though they increased my dream recall, they increased dream imagery and weird dream imagery and strange dreams. I never once had a lucid dream with either one of them. So I didn't find them very effective for that. Another herb that falls into that category is mugwort, which is used a lot by people for dream enhancement. I did once have a lucid dream on mugwort, but not usually. The herb that I found to be the most effective for lucid dreaming is something called the velvet bean, which is used in Ayurvedic medicine. It's also available in health food stores, and it naturally contains an amino acid called L-dopa, which is a precursor to dopamine in the brain. And I found that when I took that before I went to sleep, not only did it make me hornier in the morning when I woke up, but it increased the vividness of my dreams dramatically and my chance of having a lucid dream quite a bit. And I've had many lucid dreams using velvet bean that way. So those are the herbs that I found to be the most effective.
Interesting. Did you ever try like just regular L-dopa, or did you find that wasn't like the same?
I've never tried pure L-dopa. I've only tried it in velvet bean.
Oh, okay. I mean, it'd probably be the same thing, I guess.
Oh, it is the same. It's the same chemical. There's just other things in the velvet bean that supposedly, according to Ayurvedic medicine, help to modulate the L-dopa to make it safer.
Interesting, yeah.
So that's from what I understand.
So with lucid dreams, like you have mentioned like out of body experiences and lucid dreams as well. Wouldn't like a lot of people debate on the differences between those experiences, and I'm trying to figure out like your perspective of like differences in between them and the similarities and how you kind of deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big debate in the lucid dream community. Whether out of body experiences and lucid dreams are really two aspects of the same phenomena, or whether they're completely different phenomena. In one, there is the one camp that does believe that out of body experiences are distinct, and they see them as different from lucid dreams. They see lucid dreams as being purely fabrications of the mind, purely created out of imagination and memory. And they see out of body experiences as being, true traveling of a spirit or a soul out of the body into the physical or into another realm of existence where it exists separate from the body and can bring back experiences. I have never come to a firm decision about that, but I can say this much. I used to work at an isolation tank center, a flotation tank, and I used to float regularly in these, silent, dark, saltwater tanks. And I used to go into sleep paralysis and have out-of-body experiences all the time.
Wow.
It was a regular phenomenon for me. Almost every time I go into an isolation tank, I'd have a period where I'd, feel paralyzed. I'd feel the fear. I'd be able to move. I'd leave my body. I'd be able to move around. And every single out-of-body experience that I had eventually became a lucid dream, or eventually became a regular dream, where I even forgot that I was dreaming. So whether they are or not the same phenomena, they certainly merge together for a lot of people. A lot of things that start out as an out-of-body experience, when you feel like you're leaving your physical body, then seems like you're just having an ordinary dream later on. So there seems like there's some kind of crossover. Some of the evidence against it being a lucid dream is that people who have had near-death experiences on the operating table, who hearts have stopped and they should not have been able to, should have been not enough brain activity to understand what's going on, can sometimes report, things going on in the operating room that they should not have been able to hear and shouldn't have been able to know, and sometimes from vantage points that they shouldn't have been able to see, sometimes from above. So there is this very interesting phenomena too that's also been reported and in some cases verified. So, gosh, it's just such a mystery. It's like there's other ways of explaining it though. And there are people who are skeptical of the near-death experience and say, yeah, well, maybe they're just, maybe they are hearing it. Maybe there's just some kind of psychic, ability going on. Maybe they can telepathically, understand people's minds. It doesn't mean they're necessarily leaving their body. There's so many ways of looking at this. It really is a very complex and mysterious phenomenon. I don't have a firm belief one or another, but we know from scientific studies, though, that people who have out-of-body experiences more frequently also have lucid dreams. So there's that connection as well. That, the same people tend to have more of both. But whether they're distinct phenomena or aspects of the same phenomena, again, is one of those mysteries that needs further scientific exploration.
I'd like to also throw something else into the ring. How about daydreams, where you still get sensory information, but you're in a different place. And sometimes, like I'm a big daydreamer, and I can still hear the things going on around me and be aware of the space going on around me, but I'm also having a dream at that moment.
Yeah, and people daydream to different degrees. For some people, it's a more encompassing experience than it is for other people. In other words, some people don't quite separate so much from their environment, and some people, when they daydream, really do go somewhere else. So it's not as universal. And I think what you're describing is what you're describing the way you do it. I tend to think that you tend to be a little bit on the dreamy, visual imagination, enhanced, mystical side of reality in general. So it's probably easier for you to access those states than most people, I would think. Am I right?
I'm not sure, but it seems to me that there's like different there is to me different levels of dreaming and different levels of awareness. And the more I become aware, the more of just anything. Like the more I learn about, carpentry, or the more I learn about, how boats work, the more uh the more I have access to information, the more I have access to higher states of dreaming.
Right.
The way I feel like.
Right. Yeah, well, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, David, you were talking about in your book, you talked about like conscious dreaming and spiritual awakening, and it sounds like a lot of these experiences, including what Matt's kind of talking about here, is like kind of geared around to becoming more aware of your reality and as well as like aware of your consciousness and what consciousness means. Can you talk a little bit about what you meant by conscious dreaming and spiritual awakening?
Yeah, well, conscious dreaming, lucid dreaming, has been used, as I mentioned earlier, as a technique in Tibetan Buddhism and Sufism and other mystical traditions for thousands of years. It's been used in Tibetan Buddhism as a path to enlightenment, to realizing that we're not our egos and our bodies, but we're something much more timeless and ancient, and and also as a preparation for the after death process, for what they call experiencing the bardos. So it's been utilized as a technique in different spiritual traditions for thousands of years, and I think anyone who embarks on lucid dreaming as a path in their life will basically go through stages with it, where they first utilize it for fantasy fulfillment, flying and underwater and sex and food and all kinds of sensory oriented kind of phenomena, and then people get more interested in the subtleties of it, talking with the characters, the aspects, what's real, what's not real, and then people start to use it for practical applications. Can I use it for my creativity? Can I use it for my writing? Can I use it for my painting? Can I use it for healing? And those sorts of things. And then usually, if people stick with it and stay with it long enough, inevitably they reach the point where they start to see it as an avenue towards spiritual development. You just naturally start to understand that that the relationship you have with your dream is very similar to your relationship you have with waking reality. You're modeling it all in your mind, like I said earlier, and you're really, really connected to something much deeper than both realities. That there's a sense to yourself that's much higher and much deeper than physical reality or dream reality. Both are just aspects of the same thing. They're both aspects of mental concepts in some way, and you have a deeper sense of presence, and that can be achieved, in lucid dreaming. I mentioned earlier dialoguing with the dream, as a way of talking, having a kind of a spiritual connection with the universe in some sense. And also, one of the things you can do is meditate in the dream. After you become lucid, sit down on instead of flying and doing all these adventures, do the simplest thing: sit down on your dream floor, close your eyes, and just start meditating. And you'll find that you can almost instantly go into very deep states of like samadhi and really powerful states of a spiritual awakening. So it's definitely I think an important path and tool that for spiritual awakening and increasing spiritual awareness. And I think it happens naturally to anyone who sticks with lucid dreaming long enough, that they'll eventually be led to these aspects of it.
Definitely, that resonates in my life as well. I've been a lucid dreamer since I was a little kid, and didn't expect to have any type of spiritual awakening happen in my life, but kind of just naturally happened, and trying to understand what spiritual awakening means to me has been a kind of a lifelong process, but it definitely has changed who I am as a person. With these experiences, though, do you know of like any dangers or anything like that? I know like with Kundalini and things stuff like that, people always talk about the dangers of doing that when you're not really prepared for it. But with lucid dreaming and having out of body experiences, do you find there's any type of danger that people should be aware of?
Well, Lee, when I first started this book, I thought that was a silly question. Like, how could you run into any problems in a dream? You just wake up, right? I mean, what could be the problem? There actually are dangers. I mean, anything that we consider a real medicine is going to have, if it really has, potential to do something to create change, then there's a positive and a shadow side to it. So I discovered in researching my book that there are a number of case studies, people who were schizophrenic, who had been practicing lucid dreaming and ran into some problems. One schizophrenic, believed that he was communicating with the devil in his lucid dreams and ended up committing suicide. Somebody else, I forget their name, but it was a famous mass murderer. I think it was in Arizona. He killed a number of people at once, and talked about how lucid dreams, if you look in his journals, were a part of directing what he was doing. And he said that he was dreaming with an alarm clock that wouldn't wake up, or something was in the journal, or some kind of reference to not waking up. And people speculated as to whether he could have thought he was dreaming when he was actually doing this. So I guess in answer to your question, Stephen LaBerge told me that he knows of no cases where there's really been anybody ran into danger, that it's very safe and only has therapeutic applications. But there are these rare cases that I've read about. So it seems for most people, it's pretty safe and haven't really had any problems. The worst that will happen is you get a little shaken up and you can just wake up, and you'll be in your bed and you can think about what's going on. But and there are, I guess, also there's a number. It's very hard to prove this, of course, but a number of reported cases, mostly from people that survived conditions of war, where they had nightmares or were having nightmares. Those people died in their sleep of a heart attack. And so it's thought that sometimes a very scary experience in a dream can be scary enough to cause some people to actually have heart attacks. Mm-hmm. These are extremely rare things that I'm talking about and not even really confirmed, but it's some answer to your question that there are possibly some dangers. So somebody who, I think, the same thing that goes for psychedelics, somebody who is not mentally stable, somebody who is already having difficulty distinguishing between reality and fantasy, probably shouldn't be messing around with techniques that make reality bigger and weirder than it already is,
Yeah.
So,
definitely.
So that's what I would say to that.
I mean, like, what are some ways that you've kind of like for my experience, this has definitely changed my life and how I operate. I mean, I'm doing podcast interviews with people interested in stuff now, so it's definitely changed my life. But how have you integrated these experiences that you've had into your life, and like how has it changed you, and how have you kind of dealt with that, like operating in normal society still with having these profound consciousness changing experiences?
Gosh, that's a great question. And I guess I'm kind of in a really unique situation because, I've been integrating these things into my life from a young age, since I was a teenager, and as in my early 20s, luckily fell into a, great crowd of people who have sort of nurtured me and allowed me to grow. And express my creativity and my abilities, through my books and through my writing and through my talks, and so all these things that I've explored through my psychedelic experiences, through my dream experiences, through my meditations and other psychic explorations, I've been able to directly put into the books that I write and the work that I do. So for me, it's how I make a living doing this. This is how I make a living. So I'm in a really lucky situation. I feel very, very blessed. But I basically learned how to take these insights and creative ideas and visions that I've had in my psychedelic experiences and with my lucid dreams and things like that, and been able to market them in my books and give them a life of their own in some kind of way. So that's the way I do it, on a psychological level too. I mean, for me, that's how I how I've been able to somehow make it into a meaningful career.
Nice. Yeah. And also, I mean, you mentioned kind of a tribe or a community that helped you out. It sounds like, from reading your book, it sounds like you went out and kind of made connections to people that were knowledgeable about these areas and then have kind of lived through those experiences themselves and then learned from them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had very important mentors and teachers, and been able to be fortunate enough to interact with some of the greatest minds on the planet. So yeah, I consider myself very fortunate. And like I said, anyone who reads a book and really loves the book and really feels that they connect with it, write the author and tell them, or the painting that you love, write the artist and tell them, interact with them in some way. Because they were you one day, before, and they love hearing from earlier versions of themselves and younger versions of themselves who they can help to guide and help to grow.
That's great, man. Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, like I've read a lot of books on lucid dreams in the past, and a lot of them have kind of driven me crazy from trying to just finish them, because of the content in them. But your book is excellent, and it's actually it opened my eyes to a lot of different aspects than I initially thought. And I've been in this community for the lucid dreaming community for some time, and have read a decent amount of information. And it's hard to find new things that kind of inspire people. And your book really inspired me in ways that I didn't initially expect to get in a book. So I appreciate your book.
Well, dude, I thank you so much for saying that. That's exactly what I was trying to do. So I really, really, really appreciate your kind and thoughtful words, because I felt that there was a lot of things that people just weren't saying for, I guess, taboo reasons. And I thought it was obvious that these things needed to be said, and I couldn't believe I was the first one to do it. But thank you for saying that, because that's exactly what I was trying to do.
Yeah, you're very honest in it, and I like that.
Yes. Well, I try to be. It's important. We're only here for a short amount of time.
Very true.
Right?
Yeah. Right? Matt, do you have any more questions, man?
Not particularly.
Okay. Well, David, we've been talking for some time now, but is there anything that you would like to put out there about references or resources that people can get to really get in touch with you if they want to, or to get your book and to get additional books that are coming out in the near future?
Yes, let me do a little shameless plug here for myself. So anyone who wants to stay in touch with me can easily find me on Facebook. That's a really good, easy way to get in touch with me. I have a website, www.mavericksofthemind.com, mavericksofthemind.com, and that archives many of the interviews that I talked about having done are all available on that website. My books are all available on Amazon. I've written 16 books on the evolution of consciousness, 6 of which are interview books, and a couple health science books, 2 science fiction novels. And the latest are the books that have been published by Inner Traditions, Dreaming Wide Awake on lucid dreaming, New Science of Psychedelics, about my experiences interviewing people and doing psychedelics and what I learned. And of course, my latest book that's coming out, it's going to be coming out this November, is going to be called Women of Visionary Art. It's a book that I did with my wife, Rebecca Hill. And it's going to be a collection of 18 interviews with some of the most talented and extraordinary female visionary artists on the planet. And the book is in full color with illustrations and artwork on every page. And it is absolutely mind-blowing. So I encourage everyone to stay in touch and have a look at that when it comes out.
Definitely, man. Yeah, definitely. I'll be looking at it here shortly then. Thank you so much for coming and spending time with us, and talking about all these interesting topics. And I appreciated again your book, writing it and going out there and actually spending time to write it and produce something that's actually benefiting people versus just regurgitating the same content over and over again. So thanks, man, and thanks for coming and spending time with us.
Thank you. Thank you for those. Thank you again for those kind words, and for your wonderfully thoughtful questions. Your questions were great. Really appreciate it very much. Everyone, if everyone to do it again, be happy to do it again.
This episode of Cosmic Echo was brought to you by Inner Traditions. Special thanks to Starkmouth Publishing's Leticia Gomez, HypnoDNA, and Vitaly Globinko for their additional contributions. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to learn more about David Brown's work as well as his book, please visit our website at taileaters.com/CE podcast. Additionally, you can support this podcast by clicking on our donations page located on our website. We look forward to bringing you additional episodes in the near future, but until then, happy dreaming.